Hello there, people of the internet. Just a heads up, this is a video aimed more towards newer shooters than it is people that are more experienced. I get the feeling that most of the people watching this channel are people who are well experienced and having in-depth knowledge of firearms. But I do also get a good number of people who are newer to shooting and newer to this lifestyle, and they ask me all sorts of questions, and one of the questions that they always ask is, what should I get as my first firearm? Whenever I ask these people, like, what is it going to be used for? You know, how much are you looking to spend? What are you capable of doing? What's your preference? Things like that. A lot of times they tell me that they are looking for a handgun versus a rifle simply because they think handguns are easier to shoot. I'm telling you right now, if you are a new shooter, handguns are not easier to shoot than rifles, not by any stretch of the imagination. Just because rifles are bigger does not mean that they are harder to shoot. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you today a rifle that is absolutely perfect for a new shooter. This right here, I'm sure a lot of people will recognize, even the people that are new to firearms or looking to get their first firearms or anything like that. This is an AR15. This is that scary black rifle that fires nuclear bombs and is both completely ineffective against the government and a weapon of mass destruction. Now, anytime I show this to somebody who doesn't understand firearms, they're like, oh God, look at it. It's black and terrifying looking. And then I teach them how it actually works. Like, for example, my mother used to be pretty against your assault weapons. I use those quotes because that's what these kind of people refer to these kind of firearms as. She used to be against assault weapons, but she would be fine with me owning like a pistol. As a matter of fact, I lent her a handgun so she can keep herself and my brother safe. My brother, who lives with her, she could keep them safe because they live in an apartment in another city and I'm not around to go ahead and keep them safe. And since I've gotten like ludicrously into firearms over the past couple of years, she's really began to taking interest in just how they work, how to maintain them. She's started learning about them. And I explained to her that other than the gas system, this AR-15 works very much like the pistol that I gave to her. The only difference is there's a gas system that opens up the bolt on this thing as opposed to recoil operation and the delayed blowback of the pistol. And she was just like absolutely mind blown. That, I mean, I even took it apart. I was like, yeah, here's the hammer on your pistol, because I gave her a Tokarev model, 9mm Tokarev. I'm like, here's the hammer on your pistol, here's the hammer on the AR, this is the firing pin, here's the firing pin, this is the barrel, here's the barrel, this is where the rounds come out, here's where your rounds come out. Magazine loads in right here. I showed her where the magazine loaded in the pistol. She's like, wow, these are very, very similar in concept. One just rotates and unlocks by gas. And I'm like, yep, that's exactly how it is. This one right here fires obviously a different round than that handgun, but conceptually they're the same. I explained to her that a lot of your firearms out there are, generally speaking, very, very similar in concept. They might function a little bit differently, but they all are generally basically the same. You got a round that goes in, it fires, some sort of ejection system happens, you know, you have some sort of system that either keeps the bolt closed or delays the blowback. Sometimes you have gas, sometimes you have pistons, but there's some sort of system that loads a round, locks it in place, fires it, and ejects that round. Now, a lot of your anti-gunners talk about, you know, how this thing fires a 50 cal projectile and, you know, it blows up whatever it is that it even looks at, and then you got, you know, the same people saying that this right here is completely ineffective against the government because you need F-15s. This literally fires just a tiny little .223 round. It's a 22 caliber bullet. If you have a 22 or have ever shot a 22, it's literally the same caliber. It's not a 50 caliber, it's literally under half of that. Now, because the AR-15 fires such a small caliber round, the recoil on these is quite light and quite mild. In order to learn your fundamentals of shooting, like your absolute basic fundamentals, I highly recommend using a firearm that has very light recoil. The AR-15 is an excellent example of a firearm that has very light recoil. Now, in most places, you can take a .223 hunting. Some places require 30 cal or above, but you can get yourself a 5-round magazine for your AR-15 take it out hunting, you're absolutely allowed to do that. Because the round breaks apart upon impact, because it's so small, you don't really have to worry about over-penetration too terribly much. There is always that issue with over-penetration. You're never going to get rid of it, but it is less predominant with a 223 than it would be with, say, you know, a 30-06 or something, some high power round like that. Now, because the AR-15 looks so space age, a lot of people have no idea how to operate this thing. If you have any sort of familiarity with firearms, like even in general, even a bolt action, they basically work the same. Fed from a magazine, unless it's a single shot, then you only load one round in. Fed from a magazine, and you have your charging handle. In this particular case, the charging handle's on the back of the AR-15. For a lot of firearms, it's on the side. For some firearms, it's on the top. It all depends on what it is that you have, but for the AR-15, it's on the back. All you do is, just like with every other firearm out there, you pull it back, let it go forward, and your firearm has been charged. Alright, brief intermission because we have some rainfall starting to come. Alright, so a few hours later, the rain has stopped. Hopefully for good. I would like to visit the range. There's a silkworm right here. Okay, it's going back up into the tree, I guess. So I apologize if I repeat anything that I've already said. I think I covered how the AR-15 has extremely light recoil because of the tiny round it shoots, and I think I covered how simple it is to use. Despite the fact that it looks scary, it's actually very, very simple and very, very easy. What I don't think I covered is just the amount of aftermarket support that AR-15s have, especially if you have a mil-spec AR-15. You can mount absolutely anything to these rifles. You can mount rails that operate with hello, how are you? There's a silkworm attached itself to my hat. How do you like that? This tree is raining silkworms. It's also raining ticks. I just brushed one off of me. Anyway, for AR-15s, you can get rails that mount all sorts of things. If you want laser lights, they got laser lights. Flashlights, they got flashlights. You want extra fasteners to carry extra magazines, they got those things. You want optics, they got plenty of optics. You want muzzle brakes, they got plenty of muzzle brakes. They got a whole plethora of different sight designs. They got all sorts of aftermarket gizmos and whatnot that you can attach to an AR-15, down to the stuff that is just based around comedy. Like, I know that you can get a pair of testicles that you can attach to your AR-15 if you decide that the pair you have just is not good enough. The fact that the AR-15's receiver, specifically the upper receiver, is stable enough to mount rails on and not have it shake itself loose like the dust cover on an AK-47 would, is one of the major attributing factors as to why the AR-15 can have such versatility in comparison to some of these other platforms. The AK-47 definitely able to mount optics on it, but you need some sort of secondary mounting system to attach to the side of the rifle, whereas the AR-15, in most cases, unless you have yourself one of the old school carry handle upper receivers, it will have a rail on top that you can mount whatever sort of optic that you want. And for the most part, the AR-15 is an extraordinarily simple gun, and the reason I bring that up is because if you need to assemble or change something on an AR-15, odds are the AR-15 is one of those platforms that you can do at home, especially if you just hop on the internet. There's plenty of forums for you to learn how to do any sort of assembly, maintenance, disassembly, whatever it is that you're looking to do to your AR. You can do it at home. You can do it with the tools that you probably have laying around, whereas something like an AK-47, you're going to need a full-on machine shop to do any sort of legitimate work to that rifle. And if you're looking for a new firearm, the AR-15, very seldomly does a company mess up making an AR-15. Whereas very, very often, plenty of companies out there, one in specific, you know who you are, will mess up an AK-47 to the point to where the AK-47 will actually become dangerous to shoot, especially as you get higher into the round counts. Now, if you're new to firearms and you don't necessarily know what to look for, that's why the AR-15 would be a good first go-to, whereas an AK-47, you definitely want to get someone who knows what they're doing to look at it and make sure that it's safe to shoot. That is one of the primary reasons why I did not pick the AK-47 as a good go-to for a first gun, whereas the AR-15, in my opinion, is superior in that regard. Now, I'm an AK guy. All around, up, down, I am AK over AR every day of the week, especially because I can't fire out to very long distances, which is, you know, exactly suitable for the 7.62 by 39. I like the simplicity of the AK. I like the operating system of the AK. I like around the AK fires. I like the history of the AK. I like everything behind the AK. I just prefer the AK over the AR. But if you're new to firearms, I highly recommend going with the AR over the AK. Just because if you don't know what you're looking for, and you get yourself an AK that might potentially turn into something dangerous down the road, then you definitely don't want to get yourself hurt. This right here is the AR-15 that I'm using in the examples of today. I do not have a handguard that has a rail system on it. I chose to go specifically with a handguard that looks more retro, more old school, because whenever I originally got this rifle, I threw a carry handle on it, and I was making it look like, you know, an old school AR-15 model. But I threw the optic on it just because it's easier to shoot with the optic. Not only that, but I use this to teach people how to effectively shoot. I teach them fundamentals behind shooting, and it's just easier for them to put a dot on target than it is for them to aim down their sights. Iron sights comes later on. This right here is a good starting position. You could mount foregrips, flashlights, lasers, testicles. You can mount whatever it is that you want onto these things. And this right here is the AK-47 that I have for our specific, for your observational pleasure, with lack of a better term. These AKs have plenty of rivets on them. If you are familiar with firearms, then hey, you already know all about the AK rivets. However, if you're new, you might not know. You got to pay attention to those rivets and how good they're done. You got to pay attention to the fitment of the magazine inside of the AK-47. If it's not right, then your gun won't work right. To pay attention to your head spacing, you got to pay attention to the pin that holds the barrel in place. Make sure that right there is not wearing out any. You got to pay attention to your gas system. You got to pay attention to your piston. Make sure that nothing's bent, nothing's wrong. You got to pay attention to all sorts of stuff. You got to make sure that you have your aftermarket over the receiver mount for any sort of optic that you're wanting to put onto your AK, whereas the AR-15 has the rail system directly on the upper receiver. There's just a lot more that goes into an AK, making sure that it's up to par, than there is with an AR-15. Now this right here is a go-to that somebody had asked me about whenever they had brought up that the 223 was a light shooting round. They brought up the Ruger Mini 14. Now, by all means, if you are in a communist state that hates the AR-15, the Ruger Mini 14 is a good way to go. But it's considerably less ergonomic than the AR-15. For example, the magazine release to get the mag out is just quite a bit more difficult than the push-button styling of an AR-15. Not only that, but the Ruger Mini 14 is a rock-in magazine, so it takes a little bit more time to get used to mounting a mag in one of these rifles, as opposed to the AR, which you just kind of cram that thing up inside there. The bolt is exposed on the Mini 14. There's just a lot of ergonomic issues that the Mini 14 has in comparison to the AR-15. It would make a fantastic great gun, don't get me wrong, but the AR definitely makes a better first gun than the Mini 14 ever would. Did I mess that sentence up? This would make a fantastic first gun, but the AR-15 would make a better first gun. There we go. I also want to point out the variations in price. The AK-47 and the AR-15 are going to be pretty similar in price in terms of the accessories that you get for each platform. However, the Mini 14, if you decide to go with one of those, the prices on everything is quite a deal more expensive than the prices that you would get them for the AR-15. Not only that, but for the most part, your Mini 14 is going to be a lot less customizable, not unless you get an already customized Mini 14 set up specifically for customization purposes. For the most part, although some do have like folding stocks, occasionally you'll find some with telescoping stocks, but these are all higher end custom Mini 14 rifles. For the most part, they're either going to have just a fixed wood stock or a fixed polymer stock or things like that. Whereas the AR-15, pretty much right from the factory, even your bottom of the barrel AR-15s are going to have a telescoping stock of some kind, so you can adjust it to whatever length feels comfortable for you to shoot. The AK-47 does have a lot of options for telescoping stocks, but a lot of times on the AK you're going to have fixed stocks as well. People that are not new to shooting, that's not that big of a deal. But for people that are trying to get comfortable with the firearm, you want them to be as comfortable as possible. So having a firearm that can be set specifically to their size, that definitely helps. Now, just because I'm out here at the gun range, I am going to go ahead and fire off a couple of rounds from these rifles, just because. I can't come to the gun range and not fire off a couple of rounds. AR-15, just a quick review of everything. Light recoiling round, very, very easy to control rifle. Lots of aftermarket availability whenever it comes to these rifles. The ease of operation, there's a little button on the side. You just take your mag out, you can put your mag in. Here's your charging handle. If your bolt is already locked open, you can run the charging handle to close it again, or you can just press the little bolt release that we have right here on the side. That will automatically close the bolt for you. The bolt release is a good feature that the AK and the Mini 14 do not have, or at least for the most part. The AR-15 does lock open on an empty magazine, so that does make it a little easier to reload. Press that button, bolt goes home, you're chambered, ready to fire. If you're looking to make sure that your AR-15 is unloaded, first thing you're going to do is pull the magazine, and then I am not going to fully pull the round out of the chamber, but you would pull your charging handle back and you can see the round right there in the chamber. You pull it back to the point where that round comes out. However, I'm going to send some lead down range, so I'm leaving it in there. Alright, I'm just going to go for the steel silhouette, just because it's sitting right there, and boy does it look lonely. Let's give it some lead, friends. .223, very fun to shoot. Unfortunately, right now it's not very cost effective. Normally they run quite a deal cheaper than they are right now, and normally they're a lot more available than what you can find right now. Right now they're running, make sure that this is off, yep, optics off. Right now they're running roughly 50 cents a round whenever you can find them, unless you're buying them in bulk, in which case you can find them cheaper. My go-to is my AK, just because I can get a lot more ammo for a lot cheaper than I can for the AR-15. But if you're new to shooting, AR-15 is a hell of a lot easier to run than an AK is, especially if you don't know what to look for to make sure your AK is safe to fire. Alright, now I got my Ruger Mini 14. I did some work on the front end. I think I got the sights pretty close to aligned, but I'm not positive about that. So this is actually a kind of a trial run to see just how close those sights are to alignment. So for the most part, I sprayed the bottom of the steel silhouette with the AR-15. Now I'm just going to aim center and see where I hit with this Mini 14. That was pretty much center. All right, we're good. Alright, boy oh boy. I do like the Mini 14 just because of the wood stock. It makes it heavier, so there's like no recoil behind this thing. Alright, now, just because why not, I've got my AK-47 out here. I've only got 4 rounds in the AK. I fired 5 through the other rifles. Don't ask where that 5th round went. Okay, let's lob some lead here. Turn my magnification down some just because I don't need it so high at this distance. 7.62 by 39 hits a lot harder than the 223 does. As a result, I can actually hear the pinging of the steel from these rounds versus the 223. We did hit target with our 223. We just couldn't hear it very well. Of course, hell, we're knocking down a steel target with the AK. Yes, I suppose I should bring this up. Making sure your AK is unloaded, all you do, pull the charging handle back, you can actually look in there, see the chamber, make sure it's unloaded. If you have any rounds inside your magazine, take your magazine out before you let go of that charging handle. And I suppose I should do the same thing for the Ruger Mini 14, just in case, you know, you're new to shooting, you have one of these, you don't necessarily know how to make sure it's unloaded. The Ruger Mini 14 will lock open on an empty magazine, so all you have to do if your Ruger Mini 14 is locked open is you just kind of look in there, look into the chamber, make sure there's no round in there. If you do have rounds inside the chamber and you do not know how to safely not chamber around, the Mini 14 does have a bolt hold open over here on the side of the gun. All you do is pull the charging handle back and you press your bolt hold open button right here. I'm trying to watch my verbiage here. And then you can safely hold the bolt open whether or not you have rounds inside your rifle or not. Then you can safely remove the magazine. This one right here is a little on the sketchy side. Safely remove your magazine. This way you don't have to worry about chambering around, especially if like you're indoors or something like that. All right, well, long story short, if you're new to firearms and looking to get your first gun, the AR-15 makes an excellent choice for a whole plethora of different reasons. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to the channel for more because I do this kind of stuff all the time. If you like the video, do me a solid and actually like a video. That helps out with the algorithm. If you have anything else to add, leave it in the comments down below. I'm sure that somebody's going to go shifting through the comments. They might learn something from you guys, so by all means, put it down in the comments below. Hell, you might even help somebody out. Got a bunch of links in the description, and I think that's the rest of this YouTube outro. I don't really have anything else to add here. So, hey guys, thanks for watching. I'm going to go clean my shoes because they're full of water, or go dry my shoes out because they're full of water. Plenty of rain today, plenty of rain. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day. I'm probably gonna shoot something, like shoot more of something before I clean my shoes out. I'm rambling. Bye guys. Since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. The poor man's Garen. Shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.